The crash landing. The vast expanse of the Arizona desert stretched out before Jack Reeves, an endless sea of sand and rock beneath the sweltering sun. To most, this desolate landscape was a wasteland to be avoided. But for Jack, a former Special Forces operative seeking solitude after years of combat, it was a sanctuary. Jack had been living off the grid for months, his only companions the cacti and the occasional coyote. He'd left behind the chaos of war and the suffocating expectations of society, finding a strange sort of peace in the brutal simplicity of desert life. Little did he know that his self-imposed exile was about to be shattered in the most extraordinary way imaginable. It was just after sunset when Jack first saw it, a streak of light tearing across the darkening sky. At first, he thought it might be a meteor, but something about its trajectory seemed off. It was moving too slowly, its path too controlled. As he watched, the object began to lose altitude rapidly, trailing fire and smoke as it plummeted towards the earth. Jack's instincts kicked in immediately. Whatever it was going to crash, and it wasn't far from his position. He quickly grabbed his pack, stuffed with survival gear and medical supplies, and jumped into his battered Jeep. The engine roared to life, and he sped off towards the impact site, dust billowing behind him. As he drew closer, the true scale of what he was witnessing became apparent. This was no meteor or malfunctioning satellite. The object that had torn through the sky was massive, easily the size of a commercial airliner. But its sleek, otherworldly design left no doubt in Jack's mind. This was something not of this earth. The craft had carved a deep furrow in the desert floor, leaving a trail of twisted metal and strange, glowing debris in its wake. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes, and an eerie, pulsating light emanated from within the wreckage. Jack approached cautiously, his military training kicking in as he scanned for any signs of movement or potential threats. That's when he heard it, a faint, pained groan coming from within the ship. Someone, or something, had survived the crash. Jack's humanitarian instincts warred briefly with his sense of self-preservation. He had no idea what he might find inside that alien vessel. But in the end, the thought of leaving someone to die, even if they weren't human, was something he couldn't stomach. Steeling himself, Jack entered the crashed ship through a jagged tear in its hull. The interior was a maze of twisted corridors and flickering, alien technology. The air was thick with acrid smoke, and Jack had to navigate carefully to avoid sharp edges and sparking wires. As he pushed deeper into the craft, the groans grew louder, guiding him towards their source. Finally, he rounded a corner and saw her. Lying amid the wreckage was a figure that was unmistakably female, yet utterly alien. Her skin was a pale lavender, shimmering faintly in the dim light. Long, silvery hair fanned out around her, and her features, while humanoid, held an otherworldly beauty that took Jack's breath away. But it was her eyes that truly captured him. As she turned to look at him, Jack found himself staring into eyes of the deepest, most vibrant purple he had ever seen. They were filled with pain, fear, and a spark of defiance that spoke of a fierce inner strength. "Help me," she whispered, her voice melodic despite its weakness. Jack snapped out of his stupor and rushed to her side. He could see now that she was pinned beneath a section of the ship's interior, her lower body trapped by the twisted metal. With a grunt of effort, Jack managed to lift the debris just enough for her to wriggle free. As soon as she was clear, Jack scooped her up in his arms. She was surprisingly light, her body seeming almost fragile despite the resilience she must have possessed to survive such a crash. He could feel her trembling against him, whether from pain, fear, or simply the shock of her ordeal. He couldn't tell. "It's okay," he murmured, trying to sound reassuring. "I've got you. You're safe now." Her violet eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, Jack felt as if she were peering directly into his soul. Then, with a soft sigh, she slipped into unconsciousness, her head lolling against his shoulder. Jack wasted no time in getting them both out of the wreckage. He knew it was only a matter of time before others would come investigating the crash, And he had a feeling that whoever was after this alien woman, because he was certain now that someone must be pursuing her, wouldn't have her best interests at heart. As he carefully laid her in the back of his jeep, Jack's mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? And what kind of trouble was she in that would cause her to crash land on Earth? He had a feeling he was about to be pulled into something far bigger than his quiet life in the desert, but looking at the unconscious figure in his vehicle, he knew he couldn't just walk away. Starting up the jeep, Jack headed back to his hidden camp, keeping a wary eye on the horizon for any signs of pursuit. As the crashed ship faded into the distance behind them, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. Whatever came next, he was now bound to the fate of this mysterious alien woman, for better or worse. The drive back to his camp was tense, with Jack constantly checking his rearview mirror for any signs of pursuit. But the desert remained empty, the only movement coming from the occasional tumbleweed caught in the night breeze. When they finally arrived at his hidden oasis, a small cave system he'd outfitted as a living space, Jack breathed a sigh of relief. Gently, he carried the alien woman into the cave, laying her down on his makeshift bed. In the warm glow of his solar-powered lamps, he was able to get a better look at her injuries. There were cuts and bruises all over her body, some oozing a strange, silvery fluid that he assumed was her blood. But what worried him most was a deep gash across her abdomen, pulsing with an unnatural light. Jack's medical training from his military days kicked in. He cleaned and bandaged her wounds as best he could, though he was flying blind when it came to alien physiology. To his surprise, some of the smaller cuts seemed to be healing before his eyes, the edges knitting together with remarkable speed. As he worked, the alien woman drifted in and out of consciousness. Her eyes would flutter open, unfocused, and filled with pain, before closing again. Once, she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, murmuring words in a language he couldn't understand. All Jack could do was speak to her softly, hoping his tone, if not his words, would offer some comfort. It was nearly dawn by the time Jack had done all he could for her. Exhausted, he slumped down against the cave wall, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. He, Jack Reeves, former soldier and self-imposed hermit, was now harboring an injured alien in his secret hideout. It was like something out of a sci-fi novel, yet here he was, living it. Part of him wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, while another part was terrified of what might come next. As the first rays of sunlight began to creep into the cave, the alien woman stirred. Her eyes opened fully for the first time since the crash, and she sat up with a gasp, wincing as the movement pulled at her wounds. "Easy," Jack said, moving to her side. "You're safe, but you've been hurt pretty badly." She turned to look at him, her violet eyes now clear and alert. For a long moment, she simply stared at him, her gaze so intense that Jack found himself shifting uncomfortably. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and musical, with an accent he couldn't quite place. You saved me." Jack nodded. "Found your shit after it crashed. Couldn't just leave you there." A shadow passed over her face at the mention of the crash. "My ship, destroyed." "Pretty much," Jack confirmed. "I'm sorry, but there wasn't much left intact." She closed her eyes, a look of despair crossing her features. When she opened them again, there was a steely determination in her gaze. "Then they will come. We must leave this place immediately." Jack held up his hands. "Whoa, slow down. You're in no condition to go anywhere right now. And who's they? What kind of trouble are you in?" The alien woman seemed to debate with herself for a moment before coming to a decision. "My name is Lyria. I was, a princess of the Galactic Confederacy, and I am being hunted by my own people." Jack's eyebrows shot up. "A princess? Hunted? Why?" Lyria's expression hardened. "Because I dared to speak out against the tyranny of my father, the Emperor. He rules our confederation of worlds with an iron fist, crushing any who oppose him." I tried to rally support for a more just government, one that would serve all our people, not just the elite. For that, I was branded a traitor and sentenced to death. She gestured to her wounds. I managed to escape, but they pursued me across half the galaxy. I chose your world for refuge because it is considered too primitive to be of interest to the Confederacy. I had hoped to lose them here, to find allies among your people. But now, her voice trailed off, and Jack could see the weight of her situation pressing down on her. He felt a surge of sympathy, mixed with a healthy dose of apprehension. If what she was saying was true, then he had just involved himself in an intergalactic conflict. But looking at Luria, seeing the pain and determination in her eyes, Jack knew he couldn't just turn his back on her. Maybe it was his old soldier's instincts kicking in, or maybe it was something more, but he felt compelled to help her. "Okay," he said, running a hand through his hair. "This is a lot to take in, but for now, you need to rest and heal. We can figure out our next move once you're stronger." Lyria looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was clearly taking its toll. She nodded reluctantly, easing herself back down onto the bed. "Thank you," she murmured, her eyes already starting to close. "I don't even know your name." "Jack," he told her. "Jack Reeves." A faint smile touched her lips. "Jack Reeves of Earth, I am in your debt." As Lyria drifted off to sleep, Jack moved to the mouth of the cave, staring out at the desert. The sun was rising fully now, painting the landscape in shades of gold and red. It was beautiful, peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil he now found himself in. He knew that by helping Lyria, he had painted a target on his own back. Her pursuers would come, and when they did, they would likely show no mercy to the human who had aided their quarry. But as Jack glanced back at the sleeping alien princess, he felt a resolve solidifying within him. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they would face, he would stand by her side. Together, they would find a way to overcome the forces arrayed against them, and in doing so, perhaps they would change not just her world, but his as well. With a deep breath, Jack began to prepare. He had a feeling they were in for one hell of a fight, forging an unlikely alliance. As the scorching Arizona sun climbed higher in the sky, Jack Reeves found himself in a situation he never could have imagined. Here he was, a former Special Forces operator turned desert hermit, now playing host to an alien princess on the run from an intergalactic empire. If someone had told him this would be his life a week ago, he'd have laughed in their face. Now he was living it. Lyria's recovery over the next few days was nothing short of miraculous by human standards. Injuries that would have taken weeks to heal for a person were mending before Jack's eyes. The alien princess's lavender skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light as her body knit itself back together. Still, she was far from full strength, and the worry in her violet eyes never fully dissipated. "Your body's healing fast," Jack commented one evening as he changed her bandages. "But I get the feeling your mind's still racing. Want to talk about it?" Lyria sighed, her silvery hair catching the light of the setting sun that filtered into the cave. "I cannot help but think of my people, Jack, of the suffering they endure under my father's rule. Every moment I spend here, hiding, is a moment they continue to live in fear." Jack nodded, understanding all too well the weight of responsibility she carried. "I've seen my share of tyrants in my time in the military. Never on a galactic scale, mind you, but the principle's the same. They only hold power as long as people are too afraid to stand up to them. But standing up comes at a terrible cost," Lyria countered, her voice tight with emotion. "Those who speak out disappear. Entire worlds have been subjugated for daring to question the Emperor's decrees. And now, I feel I've brought that same danger to your world." Jack finished securing the last bandage and sat back, meeting Lyria's gaze. "Look, I'm not going to pretend I understand everything about your situation. Hell, a week ago, I didn't even know aliens existed. But I do know this: you can't win a fight by running away from it." Lyria's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and despair. "And what would you have me do?" I am alone, cut off from any allies I might have had. My ship is destroyed, my technology lost. I am powerless here. You're not alone, Jack said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. You've got me, and maybe that's not much in the grand scheme of things, but it's a start. The alien princess stared at him, her expression softening. Why, Jack Reeves? Why would you risk everything for something you barely know? Jack was silent for a moment, considering her question. Finally he spoke, his voice low and intense. Because I've spent too much of my life standing by while bad things happened. I told myself I was just following orders, that it wasn't my place to question. But I can't do that anymore. If there's a chance to make a difference, to fight for something that matters, I have to take it. A single tear slipped down Lyria's cheek, glimmering like liquid starlight. You are a remarkable being, Jack. Your species is young in the grand tapestry of the galaxy, yet you possess a strength of spirit that rivals any I have encountered. Jack felt a warmth spread through him at her words, but he brushed it aside with a self-deprecating chuckle. Don't go putting me on a pedestal just yet, princess. I'm just one guy, and we're up against an entire empire. We're going to need a plan. Lyria nodded, a spark of determination returning to her eyes. You're right, of course. We cannot simply hide and hope my father's forces do not find us. We must take action. Over the next few hours, as the desert night deepened around them, Jack and Lyria began to form the beginnings of a strategy. Lyria shared what she knew of her father's military capabilities, the political structure of the Galactic Confederacy, and the few allies she might still have among the noble houses. Jack, in turn, offered his knowledge of guerrilla warfare tactics, the art of fighting a superior force through stealth, sabotage, and carefully chosen engagements. He was under no illusions about the scale of what they were up against, but his years of military experience had taught him that even the mightiest enemy had vulnerabilities if you knew where to look. As they talked, a bond began to form between them. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they found common ground in their desire for justice and their willingness to fight for what they believed in. Lyria was fascinated by Jack's tales of human history, of revolutions and uprisings that had toppled seemingly unassailable regimes. Jack, in turn, was captivated by Lyria's descriptions of distant worlds and alien cultures. Your species has such potential, Lyria mused as their planning sessions stretched into the early hours of the morning. You are resourceful, adaptable, and possess a tenacity that is rare in the galaxy. If humanity were to join the galactic community, you could be a force for tremendous change. Jack raised an eyebrow. I thought you said Earth was considered too primitive to be of interest to the Confederacy. Lyria's expression turned wry. The Emperor and his sycophants consider anything beyond their immediate control to be primitive. But I have studied your world in secret for years. Your technology may be behind ours, but your capacity for innovation is remarkable. Given time and the right opportunities, humanity could stand toe-to-toe with any species in the galaxy. The implications of her words were staggering. Jack had gone from living a solitary life in the desert to contemplating humanity's place among the stars. It was almost too much to process, but he forced himself to focus on the immediate problem at hand. Well, before we worry about humanity joining the galactic community, we need to figure out how to keep your father's forces from turning Earth into a battlefield, Jack said. You said they'll be able to track the energy signature from your crushed ship, right? Lyria nodded. Yes, though the desert's natural radiation may mask it for a time. But they will find it eventually, and when they do, they will not hesitate to use whatever force they deem necessary to capture or kill me. Jack's expression hardened. Then we need to be ready for them. We can't match them for firepower, but we might be able to use the terrain to our advantage. I know these deserts like the back of my hand. If we can lure them into the right kind of trap. As they continued to strategize, neither Jack nor Lyria noticed the faint, pulsing light that had begun to emanate from the alien princess's wounds. It was subtle at first, barely visible, but as the night wore on, it grew stronger. Unknown to both of them, the unique radiation of the desert, combined with Jack's ministrations and Lyria's own remarkable biology, was catalyzing a change within her. The first hints of dawn were starting to lighten the sky when Lyria suddenly gasped, doubling over in pain. Jack was at her side in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. "Lyria, what's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his features. The alien princess's body began to glow, the light pulsing in rhythm with her rapid breathing. When she looked up at Jack, her violet eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. I don't know," she whispered. "Something is happening. I can feel power building inside me. It's like nothing I've ever experienced before." As Jack watched in amazement, the glow intensified. Lyria's wounds, which had been healing at an accelerated rate, now closed completely, leaving her skin unblemished. More than that, she seemed to radiate an aura of energy, as if she were tapping into some hidden wellspring of power. "Jack," she said, her voice filled with awe, I think your world has changed me. The unique conditions here, they've awakened something within my species' dormant genetic potential. I can sense things I never could before. The energy flowing through the earth, the air, even you." She reached out, her fingertips barely brushing Jack's arm. The moment they made contact, he felt a jolt of electricity race through him, not painful, but intensely invigorating. For a brief instant, he could sense what Lyria was describing, the pulse of life in the desert around them, the vast web of energy that connected all things. As the sensation faded, Jack stumbled back, his mind reeling. "Holy shit," he breathed. What does this mean?" Lyria stood, moving with a newfound grace and strength. Her eyes gleamed with excitement and determination. "It means, Jack Rees, that the odds may have just shifted in our favor. My father sought to destroy me, but in doing so, he may have created his own worst nightmare." She held out her hand, and to Jack's astonishment, a ball of pulsing energy formed above her palm. "We have work to do," she said, a fierce smile spreading across her face. "It's time to take the fight to the Galactic Confederacy." As the sun rose fully over the desert, casting long shadows across the landscape, Jack and Lyria stood side by side at the mouth of the cave. They were no longer just a human and an alien thrown together by circumstance. They were partners, allies in a battle that would determine the fate of not just Lyria's people, but potentially Earth as well. The dawn of a new day brought with it the promise of conflict, but also hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their unlikely alliance forged in the crucible of shared adversity and mutual respect. As they began to prepare for the battles to come, neither Jack nor Lyria could shake the feeling that they stood on the precipice of something monumental. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying with it the scent of change. The fate of galaxies hung in the balance, and at the center of it all stood a human soldier and an alien princess, united in their quest for justice. The next chapter of their adventure was about to begin, and the universe would never be the same. The awakening of Earth's defender. As the scorching sun climbed higher in the Arizona sky, Jack Rees and Princess Lyria stood at the mouth of their desert hideout, the air shimmering with possibility and danger. The alien princess's newfound powers crackled around her like a living aura, while Jack's military-honed senses remained on high alert. They both knew it was only a matter of time before the Galactic Confederacy's forces arrived, and they needed to be ready. "We need to test the limits of your new abilities," Jack said, his voice a mix of excitement and caution. "If we're going to have any chance against your father's army, we need to know exactly what you're capable of." Lyria nodded, her violet eyes gleaming with determination. "Agreed, but we must be careful. This power, it's unlike anything my people have ever encountered. I can feel it singing in my veins, begging to be unleashed." They made their way to a secluded canyon, far from any prying eyes. As they walked, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the change in Lyria. Gone was the injured, vulnerable princess he had rescued. In her place stood a being of otherworldly grace and power, her every movement fluid and purposeful. "All right," Jack said as they reached the canyon floor. "Let's start small and work our way up. Try focusing that energy you were manifesting earlier." Lyria closed her eyes, concentrating. The air around her began to shimmer, and suddenly, a sphere of pulsing blue-white energy formed between her hands. It hummed with power, sending vibrations through the very ground beneath their feet. "Incredible," Jack breathed. "Can you control it? Make it move?" With a gesture from Lyria, the sphere shot forward, carving a path through a nearby boulder as if it were made of butter. The rock exploded into dust, leaving a perfect, smoldering hole in its wake. "Holy shit," Jack exclaimed, his military composure momentarily forgotten. That's a game-changer, Lyria. If you can do that to solid rock, imagine what it could do to a spaceship's hull." Lyria's expression was a mix of wonder and concern. "The power is exhilarating, but it's also terrifying. I've never felt anything like this before. It's as if your planet itself is lending me its strength." As they continued to experiment, Lyria's abilities seemed to grow exponentially. She could levitate rocks with a mere thought, create force fields strong enough to deflect Jack's rifle fire, and even manipulate the elements themselves, calling forth miniature sandstorms with a wave of her hand. But it was more than just raw power. Lyria's connection to the energy around her gave her an almost prescient awareness of her surroundings. She could sense living beings from great distances, distinguish between different types of matter, and even peer into the quantum fabric of reality itself. "It's like I can see the code of the universe," she tried to explain to Jack, her voice filled with awe. "The fundamental forces that bind everything together, they're all laid bare before me." As Jack watched Lyria master her new abilities, a mix of emotions churned within him. Pride at how quickly she was adapting, hope that they might actually stand a chance against the Confederacy, and something else, something deeper, more personal, that he wasn't quite ready to name. But their training session was abruptly cut short as Lyria suddenly stiffened, her eyes going wide. "Jack," she said, her voice urgent, "they're here." No sooner had the words left her mouth than the sky above them seemed to ripple and tear. 3 sleek, black ships materialized out of thin air, their hulls gleaming menacingly in the desert sun. They were unlike anything Jack had ever seen, a perfect fusion of advanced technology and predatory design. "Confederacy scout ships," Lyria explained quickly. "Likely sent ahead to confirm my presence and neutralize any resistance." Jack's military instincts kicked into high gear. "How many on board?" "Typically a crew of 5 for each ship," Lyria replied. "Highly trained, armed with energy weapons far beyond your world's current capabilities." Jack nodded, his mind already formulating strategies. "All right, they may have the tech advantage, but we've got the home field advantage and your new powers. If we play this smart, we might be able to take them out before they can call for reinforcements." Lyria's expression hardened with resolve. "Agreed. But Jack, these are my people. If there's any way to end this without bloodshed—" "We'll try," Jack assured her. "But if it comes down to us or them, I'm choosing us." "Got it." Lyria nodded, and together they moved into position as the Confederacy ships began their descent. The air crackled with tension and the promise of impending conflict. This would be their first true test, a clash between the might of an intergalactic empire and the newfound power of Earth's unlikely defenders. As the ships touched down, kicking up clouds of desert sand, Jack and Lyria exchanged a final glance. In that moment, a wordless understanding passed between them. Whatever happened next, they were in this together, their fates now irrevocably intertwined. The ship's hatches hissed open, and armored figures began to emerge. Their suits were a marvel of alien engineering, sleek and imposing, with helmets that completely obscured their features. Each carried a weapon that looked like a cross between a rifle and a Tesla coil, crackling with barely contained energy. "Surrender the traitor," a mechanically amplified voice boomed out, "and your primitive world will be spared. Resist and you will be obliterated. Jack couldn't help but smirk. If only they knew what they were really up against. He glanced at Lyria, who gave him a subtle nod. It was time to show the Galactic Confederacy that humanity and its alien ally were not to be underestimated. "Sorry, boys," Jack called out, his voice carrying across the canyon. "But the lady's not interested in going back. Why don't you turn those fancy ships around and tell the Emperor he's gonna have to come down here himself if he wants a fight?" The response was immediate and violent. Energy beams lanced out from the Confederacy weapons, turning the rock where Jack had been standing moments before into molten slag. But he was already in motion, years of combat training taking over as he rolled behind cover. Lyria, meanwhile, sprang into action with a grace that defied description. She thrust her hands forward, and a shimmering barrier of energy materialized in front of her, deflecting the incoming fire with ease. The Confederacy soldiers faltered, clearly taken aback by this display of power from their quarry. "Now, Jack," Lyria shouted, and he didn't need to be told twice. Popping up from his cover, Jack squeezed off several rapid shots from his rifle. He knew the bullets wouldn't penetrate the aliens' advanced armor, but that wasn't the point. The impacts threw off their aim, buying Lyria the precious seconds she needed. With a gesture that seemed almost dance-like, Lyria called forth a whirlwind of sand and energy. It engulfed the nearest group of soldiers, lifting them off their feet and slamming them against the canyon walls with bone-jarring force. Their armor cracked and sparked, systems overloading from the raw power Lyria was channeling. But the Confederacy forces were far from defeated. The remaining soldiers regrouped quickly, adjusting their tactics. One pulled out a device that emitted a high-pitched whine, and suddenly Lyria stumbled, her barrier flickering. "Some kind of damping field," she gasped. "It's interfering with my connection to the energy." Jack's mind raced. They needed to take out that device, fast. "Can you give me a distraction?" he asked. Lyria nodded, gritting her teeth against the disorienting effects of the damping field. With a cry of effort, she slammed her fist into the ground. The earth beneath their feet shuddered and then erupted, sending chunks of rock hurtling towards the Confederacy soldiers. In the chaos that followed, Jack sprinted from his cover, closing the distance to the soldier with the damping device. The alien turned, bringing its weapon to bear, but Jack was faster. He tackled the soldier, the two of them grappling in the dust. The alien's enhanced strength was formidable, but Jack had fought for his life in dozens of hellholes across Earth. He fought dirty, striking at joints and weak points in the armor. Finally, his hand closed around the damping device. With a triumphant yell, he tore it free and smashed it against a nearby rock. The effect was immediate. Lyria's power surged back to full strength, and she wasted no time in pressing their advantage. With a series of gestures, she tore the weapons from the remaining soldiers' hands, crushing them into useless lumps of metal. "Enough," she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. "This fight is over. Return to your ships and deliver a message to my father. Tell him that Earth is under my protection now. If he wants me, he'll have to come and face me himself." The Confederacy soldiers hesitated, looking to their leader. The commander's helmet turned, taking in the scattered bodies of his comrades, the destroyed weapons, and the glowing figure of the princess they had come to capture. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "This isn't over, traitor," he spat. "The Emperor will not rest until you answer for your crimes." "No," Lyria agreed, her voice tinged with sadness. "I don't suppose it is." As the remaining Confederacy forces retreated to their ships, Jack made his way to Lyria's side. "You okay?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her violet eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I never wanted this, Jack. To fight my own people. To bring this conflict to your world." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, marveling at the warmth and energy he could feel thrumming beneath her skin. "Hey, you didn't bring this conflict here. Your father did that when he decided to rule through fear and oppression. You're fighting to make things right." Lyria managed a small smile. "How is it that you always know the right thing to say?" "Trust me, It's a new experience for me too, Jack chuckled. As they watched the Confederacy ships lift off and disappear into the sky, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They had won this skirmish, but the real battle was yet to come. The Emperor wouldn't take this defeat lightly, and next time he would bring the full might of the Galactic Confederacy to bear. But looking at Lyria, seeing the determination in her eyes and feeling the incredible power she now wielded, Jack felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance of not just surviving this conflict, but of changing the very face of the galaxy. As the desert wind whipped around them, carrying the promise of greater challenges to come, Jack and Lyria stood side by side, Earth's unlikely guardians against the storm that was brewing among the stars. The cosmic chess game. The aftermath of their victory against the Confederacy's scout ships left Jack and Lyria with a mix of elation and trepidation. They had proven that Earth wasn't defenseless, but they both knew that this was merely the opening move in a much larger, more dangerous game. As they made their way back to their hidden base in the desert, Jack couldn't help but marvel at how drastically his life had changed in such a short time. Just weeks ago, he had been a solitary ex-soldier seeking peace in the isolation of the Arizona desert. Now, he was embroiled in an intergalactic conflict, fighting alongside an alien princess with godlike powers. The absurdity of it all wasn't lost on him. "You're smiling," Lyria observed, her violet eyes curious. "What amuses you, Jack Reeves?" Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "Just thinking about how insane all this is. I mean, a month ago, the biggest decision I had to make was whether to have beans or beef jerky for dinner. Now I'm helping plan a rebellion against a galactic empire. It's a lot to process." Lyria's expression softened, a hint of guilt creeping into her features. "I'm sorry for disrupting your life, Jack. I never meant to drag you into this conflict." "Hey, none of that," Jack said firmly, stopping to face her. "I made my choice, and I don't regret it. Besides, someone's got to keep you out of trouble, Your Highness." The playful jab had its intended effect, bringing a small smile to Lyria's face. But as they continued their journey, the weight of their situation settled back upon them. They needed a plan, and fast. Back at their makeshift base, Jack and Lyria pored over the information they had gathered from the defeated Confederacy soldiers. Lyria's newfound abilities allowed her to interface directly with the alien technology, extracting data that would have been impossible to access otherwise. "It's worse than we thought," Lyria said grimly, her hands dancing over a holographic display she had conjured. "My father isn't just sending a fleet to capture me. He's mobilizing for a full-scale invasion of Earth." Jack's blood ran cold. An invasion? But why? "I thought Earth was considered too primitive to be of interest." Lyria's expression was pained. It was. "But now that I've manifested these new powers, my father sees Earth as a threat. He fears that if other humans were to develop similar abilities, it could upset the balance of power in the galaxy. He intends to subjugate your world before that can happen." The implications were staggering. Earth, with its divided nations and relatively primitive technology, stood no chance against the full might of the Galactic Confederacy. Millions, perhaps billions, would die. "How long do we have?" Jack asked, his military mind already racing through scenarios. "A few weeks at most," Lyria replied. "The main fleet is gathering at the edge of your solar system. Once they're fully assembled, they'll strike hard and fast." Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. "Damn it. We can't fight a war like this, just the two of us. We need help, resources, a way to level the playing field." Lyria was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then, slowly, a spark of hope lit up her eyes. Perhaps there is a way, but it's dangerous, Jack, incredibly so." "At this point, I'm open to anything," Jack said. "What are you thinking?" Lyria waved her hand, and the holographic display shifted to show a massive space station, unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It was a sprawling construct of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields, easily the size of a small moon. This is the Nexus, Lyria explained. It's a neutral trading hub and diplomatic center, located in a pocket dimension at the heart of the galaxy. Every major civilization has a presence there, including some that rival the Confederacy in power. If we could reach it, we might be able to rally support for our cause. Jack studied the image, his tactical mind already assessing potential approaches and vulnerabilities. Okay, but how do we get there? Our rise are a bit limited at the moment. A mischievous glint appeared in Lyria's eyes. Well, that's where things get interesting. You see, Jack, we're going to steal a ship. Not just any ship, mind you. We're going to take my father's personal flagship. Jack's eyebrows shot up. You're joking, right? Please tell me you're joking. But Lyria's expression remained deadly serious. It's the only way, Jack. My father's ship, the Eternal Dominion, has the clearances we need to access the Nexus. Plus, it's the last place anyone would expect us to be. They'll be looking for us to hide, not to make such a bold move. As crazy as it sounded, Jack had to admit there was a certain logic to the plan. It was so audacious, so unexpected, that it just might work. But the risks were enormous. Even if we managed to get on board, Jack pointed out, we'd be massively outnumbered. How are we supposed to take control of an entire capital ship? Lyria's smile turned predatory. That, my dear Jack, is where my new powers come in. I've been practicing, pushing the limits of what I can do. I think I might be able to interface directly with the ship's systems, become one with it, in a sense. The implications of what she was suggesting were mind-boggling. If Lyria could truly meld her consciousness with a ship as powerful as the Eternal Dominion, they would have a weapon of unprecedented power at their disposal. All right, Jack said, a mix of excitement and apprehension coursing through him. I'm in, but we're going to need one hell of a plan to pull this off. Over the next few days, Jack and Lyria worked tirelessly, refining their audacious scheme. They pored over the data they had stolen, studying the layouts of Confederacy ships and the protocols used for boarding and security. Jack's Special Forces training proved invaluable, allowing him to spot weaknesses and devise strategies for infiltration. Lyria, meanwhile, pushed herself to new limits, honing her control over her burgeoning powers. She practiced melding her consciousness with smaller pieces of technology, preparing herself for the monumental task of interfacing with an entire capital ship. As they worked, the bond between them deepened. They moved in sync, anticipating each other's thoughts and actions with an almost supernatural ease. In quiet moments, Jack found himself marveling at Lyria's determination, her willingness to risk everything to save not just her people, but his world as well. For her part, Lyria was continually amazed by Jack's resilience and adaptability. Here was a being from a primitive world, yet he approached problems with a creativity and resourcefulness that put many advanced species to shame. More than that, his unwavering support and belief in her gave Lyria a strength she had never known before. Finally, after what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, they were ready. Their plan was in place, as foolproof as they could make it given the insane odds they faced. All that remained was to set it in motion. On the night before they were to put their plan into action, Jack and Lyria stood outside their desert hideout, gazing up at the star-filled sky. Somewhere up there, the forces that would decide the fate of Earth were gathering. Tomorrow, they would throw themselves into the heart of that gathering storm. "Are you afraid?" Lyria asked softly, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Jack considered the question for a moment before answering. Terrified, he admitted, but also excited, ready. "Whatever happens up there, Lyria, I want you to know that I'm glad I met you. Glad I got to be a part of this." Lyria turned to him, her expression a mixture of emotions too complex to name. Without a word, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief but intense, filled with all the things left unsaid between them. When they parted, Lyria's eyes shimmered with an otherworldly light. "No matter what happens, Jack Reeves, know that you have changed me. Changed my perception of what's possible. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Jack nodded, his heart racing from more than just pre-mission jitters. Together, he agreed. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Jack and Lyria made their final preparations. They were about to attempt the impossible: infiltrate the most heavily guarded ship in the galaxy, seize control of it, and use it to rally an interstellar alliance against the Confederacy. The odds were astronomical, the dangers unimaginable. But as Jack looked at Lyria, saw the determination blazing in her violet eyes, he knew that they had a chance. More than that, he knew that win or lose, this was where he was meant to be. With a shared nod of readiness, they activated the device that would transport them to the Eternal Dominion. In a flash of light, they vanished from the desert, leaving behind the world they were fighting to save. The next chapter of their adventure was about to begin, and the fate of Earth, perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Dominion's fall. The void of space shimmered and warped as Jack and Lyria materialized on the outer hull of the Eternal Dominion. The massive flagship of the Galactic Confederacy loomed before them, a behemoth of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields that dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. Jack's specially designed stealth suit, a fusion of his military gear and Lyria's alien tech, kept him protected from the vacuum of space. He turned to Lyria, marveling at how she seemed perfectly at ease in the cosmic void, her body wrapped in a cocoon of her own energy. "Ready?" he asked through their neural link, another gift of Lyria's enhanced abilities. Lyria's response came not in words, but in a surge of determination and focus that flowed through their connection. With a gesture, she created an energy field around them both, and they began to move across the ship's surface, searching for their entry point. As they approached a maintenance airlock, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of unreality. Here he was, a former Earth soldier, about to infiltrate an alien warship capable of destroying entire planets. The sheer scale of what they were attempting was almost paralyzing. Lyria sensed his unease through their link. "Focus, Jack," her thoughts whispered in his mind. "Remember, in this moment, we are not small. We are the harbingers of change, the spark that will ignite a revolution across the stars." Her words steeled his resolve. They had come too far to falter now. With practiced precision, they bypassed the airlock security and slipped inside the ship. The interior of the Eternal Dominion was a maze of sleek corridors and pulsing energy conduits. Crew members, a diverse array of alien species all bound to the Confederacy's rule, hurried about their duties, unaware of the intruders in their midst. Thanks to Lyria's powers and the data they had stolen, they were able to move through the ship unseen, making their way towards the central control hub. But as they neared their goal, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. "Impossible," Lyria gasped. "They couldn't have detected us." A booming voice echoed through the corridors, and Jack felt Lyria's shock ripple through their link. "My wayward daughter," the voice intoned, dripping with malice. "Did you truly think you could sneak aboard my ship unnoticed? I've been aware of your approach since you left that pitiful mud bowl you've been hiding on." "Father," Lyria whispered, her voice a mix of fear and defiance. The Emperor's laughter was cold and cruel. "Oh yes, child, welcome home. I do hope you'll introduce me to your pet human before I have you both executed for treason." Jack's mind raced. Their entire plan hinged on the element of surprise which they had just lost. But as he looked at Lyria, saw the determination blazing in her eyes, he knew they couldn't give up. "New plan," he said quickly. "We fight our way to the control hub. Go loud, go hard. You said you could interface with the ship's systems. Time to put that to the test." Lyria nodded, her body beginning to glow with power. "Stay close to me, Jack. This is going to get chaotic." What followed was a battle unlike anything in human history. Lyria unleashed her full power, tearing through the ship's defenses like they were tissue paper. Energy beams lanced from her hands, overloading systems and incapacitating soldiers. Jack fought at her side, his earth weapons enhanced by Lyria's power, each shot finding its mark with uncanny precision. They fought their way through waves of elite guards, battle droids, and automated defense systems. The ship itself seemed to turn against them, gravity fields fluctuating wildly and force fields springing up to block their path. But Lyria's connection to the cosmic energy that permeated the universe allowed her to counter each obstacle, bending the very fabric of space around them. As they neared the control hub, they encountered the Emperor's personal guard, towering beings in armor that crackled with destructive energy. Jack's military training kicked into overdrive as he ducked and weaved through their attacks, using their size against them in the confined space of the corridor. Lyria, meanwhile, was a force of nature. Her powers had grown exponentially since their first battle on Earth, and now she wielded them with a skill and precision that was terrifying to behold. She didn't just fight the guards, she rewrote the laws of physics around them, turning their own energy weapons against them and opening microsingularities that swallowed them whole. Finally, battered and exhausted but undefeated, they reached the massive doors of the control hub. Beyond them lay the Emperor himself and the key to controlling the most powerful warship in the galaxy. "Jack," Lyria said, her voice strained from the exertion of battle. "Whatever happens next, I want you to know." "Tell me after," Jack interrupted, managing a roguish grin despite the dire circumstances. "We've got an Emperor to dethrone and a galaxy to save, remember?" Lyria's answering smile was fierce and beautiful. With a shared nod, they launched their final assault. The doors of the control hub exploded inward, and Jack and Lyria stormed into a vast chamber, dominated by a holographic display of the galaxy. And there, seated upon a throne that seemed to be made of pure energy, was the Emperor. He was both more and less than Jack had expected. A being of immense presence, his body wreathed in tendrils of dark energy that writhed and pulsed with barely contained power. But beneath the aura of menace, Jack could see the fear in the Emperor's eyes, fear of his daughter and the power she now wielded. "So," the Emperor's voice boomed, "the prodigal daughter returns, with her human attack dog in tow. Have you come to beg forgiveness, Lyria, or merely to die?" Lyria stepped forward, her own power flaring to match her father's. "I've come to end your tyranny, father, here and now." The Emperor's laughter was like the grinding of tectonic plates. "You? End me? Oh, my foolish child. I am the eternal dominion. I am the Confederacy. Entire star systems tremble at my whim. What hope do you have, Oaf?" His words were cut off as Lyria thrust her hands forward, sending a beam of pure cosmic energy lancing towards him. The Emperor deflected it, but the strain was visible on his face. "Now, Jack," Lyria shouted. This was the moment they had planned for. As Lyria engaged her father in a battle of godlike powers that warped the very reality around them, Jack sprinted for the ship's main control interface. If they couldn't defeat the Emperor outright, they could at least take control of his flagship. The Emperor rode in rage, trying to stop Jack, but Lyria kept him occupied, matching him blow for blow in a duel that threatened to tear the ship apart. Jack reached the control panel, his hands flying over the alien interface as he input the override codes they had stolen. Alarms blared as the ship's AI detected the intrusion, but Jack pressed on, guided by the knowledge Lyria had imparted to him. Suddenly, he felt a searing pain in his mind as the ship's security protocols attacked his consciousness. But before he could be overwhelmed, he felt Lyria's presence in his mind, shielding him, amplifying his efforts. With a final, desperate push, they broke through. The ship's systems bent to their will, and Jack felt the immense power of the eternal dominion flowing through him. "It's done," he shouted to Lyria. "We have control." The Emperor howled in disbelief and fury. Impossible. No human could. "You're right," Lyria said, her voice resonating with power. "No human alone could do this. But Jack is not alone. None of us are ever truly alone." With that, she reached out, not just physically but with her very essence, and touched the ship's core. There was a moment of absolute stillness, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Then Lyria screamed. Light erupted from her body, so bright that Jack had to shield his eyes. He felt a rush of something coursing through the ship, through him, through everything. It was as if every atom in existence was singing in harmony. When the light faded, the control hub had been transformed. The oppressive, militaristic design was gone, replaced by an organic, almost living architecture. And at the center of it all stood Lyria, her eyes shining with the light of newborn stars. What have you done?" The Emperor gasped, his dark aura flickering and fading. "I have awakened the ship," Lyria said, her voice echoing with newfound power and wisdom. "I have reminded it of its true purpose. The Eternal Dominion was never meant to be a weapon of oppression, Father. It was meant to be a cradle of life, a seed ship carrying the potential for new worlds." She turned to Jack, and he saw eternity in her eyes. "The ship responded to the life energy of Earth that now flows through me. It has been reborn, as have I." Jack approached her cautiously, awed by the transformation. "Lyria, are you okay?" She smiled, and it was like watching a supernova. "I am more than okay, Jack. I understand now. The power that awakened in me on Earth, it wasn't just about fighting. It was about creation, about nurturing life." The Emperor struggled to his feet, his power a pale shadow of what it had been. "You can't do this, Lyria. The Confederacy." "The Confederacy is finished," Lyria said firmly, "but something new can take its place, something better." She turned to Jack. "Will you help me build it?" Jack looked at her, this being of cosmic power who had chosen him as her partner, who had opened his eyes to wonders beyond imagination. There was only one answer he could give. "Always," he said. As the transformed Eternal Dominion turned away from Earth, carrying with it the seeds of a new galactic order, Jack and Lyria stood together at its heart. They had started out as unlikely allies, a human soldier and an alien princess, and had become something far greater. The fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy had been changed forever. And as they set course for the stars, neither Jack nor Lyria could say for certain what challenges awaited them. But whatever came next, they would face it together, guardians of a new cosmic dawn.